All right, guys, so this is gonna be the new pattern that we're gonna be doing for Zentangle. Just a reminder as far as the spelling for Zentangle in case you have to look it up, it's Z-E-N, Zen, and then tangle. Okay, and on this particular one, this name of the Zentangle pattern is Ixorus. So that is the spelling for that one, okay? Now, on this one, you're going to have options because some people, like in the past, from what I've seen, they've done different varieties of this. You can make the lines more curvy and you can do the lines more straight, and it's gonna give you a different illusion for every single one. So if you wanna play around with it from box to box, because just a reminder, you have to do a total of 4 boxes, about 3 inches by 3 inches more or less for the practice. Then you can go ahead and change it from each one. Try a curved line for the first one and then try a straight line for the next one and see which one you like better. So that way, when you do your final design and you're putting them all together, you can see what are the ones that you prefer, okay, for your images. Now, I'm gonna still write the steps on this side. So I will be writing it over here, as far as for the written form, just because it'll kind of help guide you. So if you don't have to click back on the video and you can just look at the steps, you're gonna remember how to do this one, okay? So the first step on this one is you are going to draw, and I'm gonna actually draw it on here, and it's gonna look something like this. It's gonna be like a star. So I'm drawing it because visually I can remember this. So do this, and I'm gonna put shape. So draw a star shape. Now, as far as the star shape is concerned, you're gonna have options. You can choose to start at the corner. You don't have to. You can start a little bit further out. And like I said, it's going to give you different illusions for each one. On this one, just by chance, just because I know there's another pattern that I'm going to show you guys that's a little bit similar, I'm going to do corner to corner on this one. And then when I do the other pattern on the other day, then I'm going to change it up and I won't start from corner to corner. But on this one, I will. And I'm actually going to keep these lines fairly straight. If you want to curve your line, like I said, let's just say I go from here because it's the star shape. So corner to corner here, but let's say I don't want to do it straight and I want to curve it. Like I said, it's going to give you a different illusion. So I'm going to keep mine straight for the sake of this one. But on your second box, you guys can choose to play around with it. And then I'm just going to go from the top to the bottom and intersect right at the center. Okay. So that's the first step that you guys should try to do, and kind of straighten up your lines if you can. Well, for those of you guys that are doing straight. Now, after that step, the second step is going to be to draw, and I'm going to put a second line right next, and I was going to already write 2, to the first design. So as far as that, what I mean by a second line, what I want to do is I'm going to take a look at this first line that's here, and only from the corner to the middle section. And I am going to draw from this line this way, a second line right next to it. Okay. So you can see that these lines are parallel. So even if it's a curved line, you want to make sure that it's parallel to that curve. Okay. And if it makes sense for me to draw it just because I can see it, because maybe I might not understand what that text is, I can just draw this little second line as my shape and draw a little arrow so I know what I'm talking about. Now, here's the trick, because I'm going to do this to every single one. But if I decided to draw my line on the right-hand side of that particular line, then I have to make sure that I do it to the right-hand side to every single one. If I do this, and then all of a sudden I come over here and I do it on the opposite side, it's gonna throw the pattern off. So what I usually suggest for this step is turn your paper. So I did it to the right side. Let me turn my paper. It's not glued to my table, so it makes more sense for me. This is my first line right here. So I'm gonna go on the right-hand side and draw a second line right next to it. And then I'm gonna turn my paper again, and here's my line right here. So I'm gonna draw a second line right next to it on this side of it, on the right side. Same thing for this one. And if I continuously turn my paper and I just continuously do it on that side, I will not get lost. Now, usually where I see people mess up on this is on the last line, they just forget, they turn it and they want to do it all of a sudden on this, and because they see the line here and they want to follow it. That's not the case. You still have to do it on the right hand side to get this particular illusion when we're going to do it for the final design. Okay, so it always has to be on the right hand side. So that's the thing that you have to make sure that you do it on the same side for every single one. If I decided to do it on the left hand side, then I got to do it on the left for every single one. So whichever one you choose is fine with me. Okay, now that I did that, my next step, so step 3, is going to be to draw the S, and I'm going to put it in little quotation marks, the S shape. And that's what this looks like. I'm going to show it to you right now. So once I finish drawing the double line on every single one, I'm going to turn it slightly just because I'm going to start with this one. And I want it up and down so I don't get lost by what the meaning of S shape means. And what I'm going to do is I am going to take my pencil on this corner here, and I'm going to come and draw like a little hoop to about halfway, skip to the other side, and then draw the other side to create that little S shape that you see here, okay? And I am going to do that for every single line. So like I said, turn your paper so you don't get lost because you could draw it wrong. So if I have this straight up and down, then I can go ahead and do my S shape. So I'll draw this to the half, come around this way, draw this the other half like that you see there. Okay, and I'm going to do that to every single line. So if you understood that, just turn it around so you see it straight. And I'm going to draw another S shape right here. You notice that because the line is smaller, it's going to look smaller, and that's okay. They don't all have to be the same. For those of you guys who decided to do the curved lines, yours is going to look different, because if you curved these original lines versus them being straight, then it's not going to look like mine, and that's okay. This is the time to play with the designs from one to the other. Like I said, you can do straight on the first one, and then on the second one that you do, you can always do the curved lines, and that way you can see which one works better for you. Which one do you like better, okay? So after I create this step, the next step that we have here is to, you can either do one or the other if you're going to get lost and so forth. I usually like drawing the lines that fall in between. So on step 4 for me, because this is the steps that I take as far as to create this particular pattern. So step 4 is to draw the pattern in between the S. And so what I want to do with that, guys, so let's take a look at each individual part, because this is usually where people get lost. And if yours comes out different versus mine, it's okay, because we don't want them all to look the same. So if I create more patterns with it, or I can get creative and do other patterns, then it'll work, okay? So what I'm going to do for this one, just because we're going to stay true to Ixorus right now, is I'm going to take this particular image here and I'm going to go around like this. And instead of hitting the edge right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this way. Can I go all the way around and just create that hoop? Yes, I can do that as well. But I want to create some more interest. So this is why I'm taking it in this direction. Now, before I do the next one, I need to make sure that I complete this one first. So I'm going to do one on the top and one on the bottom. So when I come over here, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to do one on the top and bring it this way, one on the bottom. Now here they already start to intersect. So I'm no longer going to draw any more going in that direction. What I'll do is I'll bring it this way and I will make a small little pattern going outward. Okay. And I will just do that for all of them. This is why I say do it light, because for me, this is kind of bothering that they're touching too much. So I would prefer, I'm going to go and change it even before I start with shading and so forth, which is usually the last step. I'm just going to make a little point right here and kind of end it there, because I think that looks better than connecting it. So this is why you should keep your lines, like I said, very light before you continue. Okay, here the spacing is too narrow if I compare it to this one. So I'm going to just start this way. Now, let's just say you didn't want to do this pattern and you want to end it, you can do that as well. So if you want to just go like this and just take it all the way to the end and not have to worry about those, this is, like I said, this is the time to play around with those, because if you don't want to take it all the way, you don't have to. And I'll just continue all the way around. So each one of these areas, and this one I'll go ahead, since it's on the bottom half, I'm going to keep it the same. I'm going to just draw two like this. And then right here, it's too little of a space, so I'm just going to go here and I'm going to connect the two. And then because this side, I did this, I'm going to go ahead and do it to this side as well. So that way it's balanced. So when I did this one originally, what I ended up doing was I went around and then I left some space here and I went to the side. And this part did get all the way. So I'm going to leave it like that because I'm just going to do it on this one side. And then I need to do two lines here. And then right here, there's not enough space, so I'm going to touch it. So you just continue. And like I said, if your pattern is completely different, it's okay. I want the variety from you guys. So as long as it looks more or less, it's a variation of what I am showing you, it's still going to count as Ixorus. Just because I'm changing, like, let's say, well, I don't want to do this pattern in here. I want to do polka dots. Okay, because you have this right here, it's still considered Ixorus. So when you get to your final, and I'm telling you guys that you have to use a certain amount of number of what I'm showing you, whether it be the 2 or 3, depending on how many I get to show you guys in the next couple of weeks, you still have to have some variation of the shape that I'm showing you as far as the pattern, but it's not necessary to be exact 100% because you might have a different vision compared to what I'm seeing on your paper, and you're like, no, but I think this will look better. So if you can justify and it still looks good as a pattern, I'm not going to say, oh no, go back and fix it. Okay. So I'm just going to continue with the rest. And on the top, since I did the top like this, I'm going to go ahead and do these. This is too shallow of an area. Usually the smaller ones are. So I'm just going to do the little V shape like that, whatever fits, maybe a little one right there. And then the same thing for this one. This one will fit too, for sure, like that. And then I can go ahead and just do the V shape going up. Okay. So after that, once you do the pattern, the next step, of course, is going to be shading. So the transition. So step 5 is going to be transition. So if I'm doing transition, there's options that you guys can do for this. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that you can do that will create different illusions. I'm going to sharpen my pencil for this one just because it is going to be a tight little area. So if you pay attention to the center first, so I'm going to start right here. I want to create a little star out of this. And remember, I told you guys the illusion from the last time that anything that goes underneath something else, which it almost looks like a little strip of paper almost, and it's going underneath this one that it's folded, creates a shadow. So if I want to make it look like it's going on the bottom, what I want to do is take my pencil and darken the line in this little area right here. And I'm going to lift the transition very quickly because I want it to look like a little white strip of paper. And I don't want to transition too much. So what I'm doing is I'm just creating that small little shadow like right there, like if it's a tight little shadow. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did earlier when I was doing the pattern. Turn my paper so I don't get lost. So I go in the same direction. So I'm going to use this one right here, and I'm going to darken the shadow and go dark to light in this direction. So if I keep turning my paper in the correct direction, then I will give the illusion that each one of those little lines is like a little paper strip going underneath the other one. And so I'm just going to lift it slowly. Do I have to make it look like if it's a little white strip of paper? No, if I want to do this in color and do color blending, I can do that as well. Okay, turn my paper so I don't get lost. This is the same one right here as far as the direction. So dark to light this way. And that's probably the best recommendation I can give you when you're doing something like that, is turning your paper so that way you stick to the same direction that you're doing it. And then dark to light this way. And then the same thing for this one. Dark to light in this direction. And automatically just adding that alone already creates that a little illusion that those little areas are going in underneath, and it starts to create some type of dimension, okay? Now, on these little areas, if you're gonna shade this, you have options as well. I've had people where they get away with doing it solid black. On my example that I showed the other day, which I will pull out right now just a little bit and show you exactly where I did this particular one. Like I did the first one with you guys with the changing in pencil. I showed you where it was. I'll show you where I did this. And I actually changed mine completely. So you'll see how you guys have variations on yours if you choose to do this one, okay? Some people did it solid black. Some people went dark to light towards the middle. I prefer transition just in general, just as an art teacher. And, you know, I get bored when I'm just going to do solid black. And for me, that's harder too, because you're pushing so hard and getting to the point where you're having to put a lot of pressure on your hand. And for me, when I have that little relief of having to push so hard, it's actually a lot better for my hand itself. Like people who suffer from carpal tunnel and stuff, and they still want to draw, if they know how to do transition, it's actually a lot better, you know, than having to push. And that kind of stresses out your hand a little bit. So I would prefer to do transition just general. Plus for me, it's faster. I'm so used to doing transition already. And the more you practice, the better you get at it. And for me, it's a lot faster than having to do solid, because solid takes more work if you have to put pressure on everything throughout the whole entire artwork. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do transition. Can you do these little areas where the S shape was solid black? Yes, and that's just going to give it a whole different look. So this is why you might want to play with it, because you're going to have to do a total of 4, but you only have to shade 1. So if you want to play with it within, like do this side with the transition and then this side with it solid, or if you just want to do the whole thing like that and then on a separate one, try out the solid just to see what it looks like, that's fine too. But you only really have to transition 1. So those of you guys who started shading the one you did just right now with me, as I'm shading this, if you want to do all 4 first, which I strongly recommend because there's a chance another one's going to come out better for you, wait to shade until you have all 4 completed. So as I'm going over this technique, you should be like trying to draw a second one. And then that way, when you get to all 4 with the outline only, because all you have to do is the outline for the 4, and then you choose your favorite one to do this particular method to the shading. So if you already started with me and you want to stop right there and continue the other boxes, I recommend in doing so, okay? So I'm going to continue shading these. I'm not going to shade the entire thing for you guys for the demonstration, because then it's going to take too long, but I will shade a few boxes just to show you some examples of what you guys can do for your final if you choose to do this particular design. So I'm doing this particular method. I'm not doing the solid, okay? And if anything, I'll do, because I'm only going to shade these 2. So what I'll do is this little one right here, I'll make it solid just so you can see what it looks like. And then that way it'll help you decide maybe on what you want to do for yours. So it's going to look different when I add the shading right next to it, okay? Now that I have those shaded, the rest still needs some type of shading or color blending and so forth. So you guys are going to have some options as well. Usually what I like to do, so I'll try to do them a little bit different, at least the 2 sections. What I like to do on these is just because I went dark to light this direction, I'll continue the same. And on each one of these lines, I'll just go dark to light towards the opposite area. So kind of like what we did with the organic shape project, where we went dark to light. It's kind of the same idea. So I'm going to go dark to light in this direction. And then this one, because I have a point, I have to change my direction, and I do have to shade from this angle. And just be light with it, circular motion, so it comes out smooth, and just try your best to get too white. Remember, if you're struggling with getting the light tones, hold your pencil differently. Hold it from the back, so that way as you lift the pressure with that circular motion, it'll come out a lot smoother, okay? And then, of course, this one, because I'm going in this direction, so I'm going to go ahead and just also go in the opposite direction here. So I'll go dark to light from this line going towards that circle, the half circle. And then I'll go ahead and I'll do this dark to light. Now, if you remember correctly from some of the examples that I showed you guys, there was some students who just left one section black, one section white, one section black, one section white, and they did a pattern within that. That's okay, but usually when you add transitions, guys, it's just gonna look 100 times better because you're creating different illusions. Now, what I would suggest if you were gonna do something like that, instead of just doing white, black, at least incorporate maybe transition on one of them. So if you don't wanna transition everything, you could decide just to go from this one in towards the middle. So this is a different way of doing it. And then also dark to light from this side towards the middle here. And that way you only have to concentrate on one space versus all of them. And you can leave the in-betweens white. So that way it at least contrasts a little bit between the pattern itself. Okay, so this is another variation of doing it for those of you guys that don't want to do every single line and only concentrate on every other one. And even though, because I've had people tell me in the past when they see this, they're like, well, ma'am, it's the same thing. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you're having to transition from this side and this side. So why don't you just transition from here and then transition in this way? Because it's less space. As far as the amount of space that we're dealing with, I'm not having to concentrate on going dark to light all the way to the edge, dark to light all the way to the edge. So because it is less space that I have to worry about, technically it is less work. Okay, so this is why I was telling some of the kids, no, it's not really the same. You might think it is, but if you break it down and like if I were to do it the other way of what I was doing this one, it would take me a lot longer to get this section done versus doing it like this where I'm doing it both ways. Here it's a little bit off. And what did I tell you guys? Don't use your finger if you're like, oh, I want to fix that. No, just use the eraser and lightly dab those areas that might be a little bit too dark or it came out a little bit off. And that's because of the texture down here. This is not a perfect texture that it came out. So if you use your pencil, because you don't have such a flat surface and it didn't come out right, just erase it a little bit by tapping it, not erasing it completely. So it's like a backwards transition because I'm removing the actual pencil. And then I can just go back and just lightly fix whatever needs to be fixed, okay? So I would skip this one because this is my white. And then I only have to concentrate on this little one. And you can see right off the bat how different both of those areas look. And this is why I tell you guys that in Art 1, we try to teach you guys about the shading, because if you take painting or if you take sculpture or if you take drawing with me, like the advanced drawings or Mr. Parmenas later, at least with this particular method of learning how to transition, you can give different illusions to things that you are trying to paint or trying to draw. And some people are like, what do you mean by sculpting, ma'am? You're working with your hands. Technically, you do still have to do transitions and so forth, especially if you are working with size of things that you're putting together. You might want to go from large to small. So that's a type of transition itself. And then as well as when you paint your sculptures, you're going to have to do some of that as well. And even sketches, when you guys are working on sketching and figuring out your stuff for sculpture, these are things that you will help you to create illusions and figure out what you're going to do for your finals. Okay. Now, there's one other thing that you can still do shading on to give illusion. You don't have to. You can stop there if you like the way it looks. But if I want to add more dimension to this, I can kind of create the illusion that these little areas right here are kind of like ramps, like where maybe they attach on this side and then it goes downward towards the bottom here. And maybe I have like a shadow on this where it goes dark to light this way. So I can add some transition there, kind of like what I did with those little paper strips that look like they're going underneath from each other. I can make this area look like it's going in a downward direction by going dark to light here. And then as well as over here on this side. So the moment I add this, you're going to see the depth that all of a sudden, oh, that does look a little bit better. Like the more dimension you put, automatically the better things are going to look. So I'm going to also go dark to light here. And this will create an illusion that it is coming here from the top and it's going down underneath. Almost like if you were to think like a garage, like a parking garage, you know, where they've got those ramps and so forth, like a little car is coming here, beep, beep, and goes down, you know, that kind of thing. Or the other thing you can do is create another shadow right here. So I can go dark to light this way and just give the illusion that that whole pattern is completely underneath this first step that we did, and that'll kind of push it back even more. It creates like this little window. And I can do the same thing to this one as well. I'm not going to do it so that way you can see the different between adding more shadows, which looks way better. Like if I cover this, you're like, man, that's starting to look more 3D. And then if I look at this, it looks a little bit more flat, but it's still good design, okay? But you can choose to do the same thing, like go dark to light here, and then dark to light here, and then dark to light as well here, okay? So there are other options. Like I said, some of the kids changed it up completely on the ones that they did in the previous years when I've shown this particular design. They've decided to do like I said, they wanted to do it solid, and that's fine. Like maybe you showed already transition on these areas and you just want to keep it solid on certain parts. I did that on mine as far as keeping things solid. So you can see where I did this one on my final, and I'm going to zoom out. Remember, you have to do a total of 4 boxes because I am taking a test grade for these practices, guys. So on mine, where I used it, clearly you see it, it's right here, okay? And mine completely changed it. I did use the S shape, but look at how I used my S shape. Originally, when I did the S shape like this, I kind of changed them because I wanted more pattern. So you can see how I added the black here. So I kind of, I wanted to create a different shape within these areas. So that's why I did that on mine. And I kind of made these look like little jelly beans almost, the little areas that are these that are right here, okay? On every single one of these, I decided to do something completely different as far as the pattern. So this still counts as using Ixorus on my final. Even though I changed these middle areas because I used this section, and especially because I used that little S-shaped design, that will count on your final if this is the way you are going to use yours. Of course, you don't copy the exact placement I did on mine. I'm hoping you guys understand that part of the grade on your final is going to become on how you actually design certain things. And you can even see on this particular example here that I showed of the variations of ways that I manipulated transitions to be able to get different illusions. Like, see, I use solid here, but I did shading on these parts. And it just creates more depth when you add shading like that, okay? Same thing for these little window pockets. I mean, you can see how adding the dark to light creates that little window and it's going down. So if you look at this area here, I created that little window here, made it look like it was going underneath by creating that little shadow. But then when it got to this side where it starts turning into the black and white, and then I kind of wanted to give the illusion that this is creating this little circle. That's why it's kind of like fading off into that. I was able to leave these without that window surface, and it looks like it's coming out of the window. So these are just little things that you should think about when you are designing your final. And I'm going to give you guys time. It's like I said, I would prefer that you guys do something that you're proud of and you take the time to do it correctly, something that you're going to want to keep and put on your wall and maybe frame later or that sort of thing. For the, you know, instead of just doing something that's going to be just like, oh, okay, I'm doing it for the assignment, I don't want this anymore, you know. So work on something that you're proud of. Like I said, you guys can also do stuff that's more realistic, but if you are going to do something like that, or if you're going to do the pointillism because you learned how to do pointillism already with me and you want to incorporate that on your final, you guys are more than welcome to do that as well. And just when you do that, just be sure that you do need to look at something. This is art one, so I don't have anybody here, at least not that I know of, you know, that's going to be, maybe Jada might be able to, she might be the only one that I've seen so far as to be able to draw something without looking at something. But other than that, I do need you guys looking at an actual picture if you're going to try to draw like a flower or if you're going to try to draw a bug, that sort of thing, just so that way it comes out with some type of skill level when it comes to drawing, okay? You shouldn't do anything from imagination. Unless it's like a flower maybe design that you've drawn in the past all the time and you already know how to pick that up as far as for that type of illusion, that'll probably be a different story, but you got to prove it to me on your practice, okay? So if you have a flower design that you do all the time, then that should be on those practice sheets. Incorporate it somehow so that way I can see it and you're like, ma'am, I've always drawn this one, can I draw it on my final? And then of course I'm going to say yes. All right, so I'm going to stop the video there because this is the one that I'm going to be showing and also uploading at this time. So let me stop it right there.